looking at the phrase, paving the cow path, if you kind of visualize that, cows, have their natural path, and it may weave and wander as they go from the field to the barn, if you will. And, you don't want to pave that because the cows took the path that was most appropriate for them. And more than likely, it's not a straight line. So when we look at automation, I think we really want to look at that straight line. That, hey, we're going to make an investment here to put a straight path all the way to the barn versus taking the winding road that the cow did because it was the best path for them.
Hello, and welcome to the Automation Journey. I'm your host, Colin Hutchings. Our goal with this show is to offer a wide variety of views that provide practical advice and value regardless of your experience with automation. In this very special episode, we've assembled the most essential lessons from our first 4 podcasts. Each featured a conversation with a subject matter expert from a different place in the automation universe. An operations expert who led the transformation of a massive distribution center, a veteran system integrator with nearly 3 decades of experience, an authority on standards with the largest material handling association in North America, and a consultant who helps turn automation ambition into action. Each of these discussions offered a different perspective on automation, informed by experience. However, we noticed a through line. The success or failure of an automation project rarely rests on the robots and sensors. Having the right mindset and understanding what you're automating and why is far more critical than which piece of technology you've employed. Here's what we've learned so far. Derrick Shannonhouse is Vice President of EQ Solutions, and he works with companies of all kinds on their own automation journeys. In episode 1, he did something that sounds simple, but rarely happens in practice. He gave operations leaders a clear, honest framework for knowing whether they're actually ready to automate and what's likely to go wrong if they move before they're ready.
Framing that in 2 different ways. One, just what are physical or visual cues, because there's some pretty obvious things that will tip you off. And the second part would be more the financial or more metric-driven standpoint. So on the visual, physical side, first thing is just what's the size of the warehouse or the facility they're operating in. I think as a rule of thumb, the larger the facility, the more there's probably a need for some level of automation support. And there's not a hard and fast, guideline of X amount of square feet means you have to have automation. But I would say once you're in a warehouse that's 40, 50,000 square feet, you definitely are starting to cross that threshold where it's just large enough where just the physical dynamics lend itself to needing some form of automation. So that's the first part. Second, visual related type cue is looking at their people and just what are the movement of the people in and around the warehouse and the operations. If you notice a high number of people, and if you notice them moving in some ways that are maybe unstructured or they're sort of freely moving and sometimes it'll look chaotic, that's another telltale sign that, anytime there's, whether it's a piece of machinery or person moving and they've got a path that's not predetermined or that's not precise, it's inefficient. So the people movement factor is a big one. And then the third one I would say probably stands out is what's the density of that warehouse? If they've got really narrow aisles or if they've got really tall racking and shelving. If you ever watch a forklift operator try to operate in a really tightly confined, dense warehouse, they're not doing maneuver. It's slow. It takes them a lot of time to safely maneuver forklifts and do picking operations if you're, 30, 35 feet off the ground. So that's another clear indicator where pretty likely there's an automation technology or solution that's going to help you in those sort of confined spaces do that better. So those are 3, I think just from an 80-20 standpoint, kind of visual, physical indicators to look for. If you look at it from a metric or financial standpoint, the first thing that probably jumps out is, what are your labor costs? Labor tends to be, I think, the starting point for a lot of companies where that's their first major pain point they're experiencing. But if you see your labor costs, if they're hitting about 50% of your warehouse costs, that's definitely a yellow flag. If that hits 60%, that's a clear red flag that you're definitely having some challenges in terms of efficiencies and your labor is not able to produce as much as you probably should. Another one I would put in there, and this ties to labor, but just your turnover. turnover is a huge challenge too. And that was a big problem with the company when I was giving the example of when it really just jumped off the page and they needed help. But a lot of companies in warehousing operations, it's pretty typical to have high turnover, 25, 30%. That 30%, I would probably say that's a threshold too, call that a yellow light. Your turnover is 40% or higher. That's where it's becoming a pretty serious issue. But if you notice you've got really high turnover, that's just so painful to manage through that because you think of the pressure on the HR team to find the resources and just to keep the facility staffed. You think of the lost productivity, having to retrain people continuously, and then the safety considerations are a huge part as well too. So the labor cost and turnover metrics are huge.
Once you recognize those signals, the instinct is often to move fast. But Derrick has a clear view on what happens when companies skip the foundational work.
I would say it's just having a lack of project infrastructure out of the gate. If there's not some semblance of a program management office, and if all the stakeholders don't understand what's the timeline, what are their expectations in terms of their involvement and their team's involvement, if that's not all well coordinated and well communicated up front, it's almost impossible for everything to go really smoothly. Because what happens is, whether it's a week in, a month in, 3 months in, you run into issues where you have to actually go through those steps. So you're going to have to do it at some point to the people that have to be involved. The project's going to basically sniff them out over time because you'll hit an issue where, oh, we didn't think about them, but we need to consult them now, or we should have asked them about this. So the more you can zoom out ahead of time, have the right PMO, project management related infrastructure, try to do your best to define as much up front. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just putting in a ton of diligence up front, that is going to save. It's going to save a ton it's going to make the project have a much better chance of hitting the timeline and just be a much better experience.
Troy Donnelly, currently the managing director at Storage Solutions, has spent 28 years on the integrator and manufacturing side, from simulation engineer to SVP of automated solutions. In episode 3, he made a case that challenges one of the most common assumptions in automation planning, that you can take a manual process, hand it to a robot, and expect better results. His argument for why that thinking is so costly and what to do instead is one of the clearest pieces of strategic advice you'll hear.
But one of the aspects I've seen a lot of mistakes made through my career is, people look at a manual operation and they say, okay, we want to automate it. And what I found is, one, manual operations were developed and designed to optimize using people to handle them. When you try to automate those, that becomes a very costly way to do it. And, the better approach is to rethink those processes to leverage the benefits of automation.
Troy's advice for anyone facing an automation decision is deceptively simple, but it changes everything about where you start.
All right, we want to do this. We want to automate this. And you end up asking them, okay, I understand that you want to, but why? Why did you pick that specific operation? What are you trying to achieve? So many times they may say, okay, maybe they want to reduce costs, or maybe they want to improve their delivery of something, and getting back to all right, what are you trying to achieve? And then let's take a step back and find the best way to do that to achieve the objective you're going for, versus going right towards a specific technology. I want to implement this new widget that we saw online.
And when it comes to the ROI conversation, Troy's view is that most companies are only looking at half the picture.
The whole ROI topic, I think, is interesting, and many times, depending on customers, what they consider or don't consider. And I'll give the example. Many times, whenever someone thinks of automation, they think of reduction of labor, which is true. But there's also more consistency in delivering of orders, and what is that worth? And being able to support your customers more, what is that worth? And then there's just even general construction cost. I've always found it fascinating that many years ago that there was a lot of automation of library systems. And people would look at that like, how can you have any ROI in library systems? And it's compelling. And the entire ROI was driven by construction cost, that the cost to build a conventional library with 8-foot shelves, costs X amount, or if you automate it, it costs Y, and it's just significantly cheaper. So whenever there's an ROI discussion, it's a comparison. And I think that is where sometimes people don't necessarily view it correctly, because they will create a higher threshold for the automation and not have a parallel path for doing it manually. Because many times in a manual operation, it may not even be achievable, because they'll say, all right, we want to build this and it needs to do this. Okay, this would cost that much. How would you do that manually? And many times, the building, let's say, isn't even large enough. Okay, well, what's the cost to now go to outside storage, and what's the additional labor to handle all that? So with any type of ROI discussion, you need to make sure that it's truly an apples to apples comparison.
Lina Alvarado is a supply chain director who led the transformation of a distribution center from 250,000 to 800,000 square feet, integrating multiple automation vendors simultaneously in a live facility without halting operations. Although the project was a success, Lina was candid about the gap between what the business case projected and what implementation actually looked like. Her account is one of the most honest and instructive you'll hear.
There was like an original idea that everything gonna just communicate and go well from the beginning. And the fact is, each of the state of the full systems are based in a different vendor and a different language. And the interfaces to make everything flow through, it definitely was a challenge. And it was a big part of the reiteration that we needed. Like the auto store, the box builder, the conveyor, the shoe sorter, the label printers, all of that were in a different mini house that needed to interact with the rest of them. If one of these break or one of those connections do not send the right signal or have a small delay or something like that, the full system collapses. It's as simple as that. So I would say that was the major change. The main technologies were selected from the beginning, and we did not change vendors in the middle of the way.
One of the hardest realizations Lina describes is around vendor resource continuity. The experts who built your system are reassigned the moment the implementation is complete. And what they leave behind is a gap that is all too common without a robust vendor support strategy.
That is very, very challenging because it's kind of out of your control as a customer, because the service level agreement is some deliverables indifferent of which the resource that the vendor is using to get to those deliverables. Then if it's more painful or less painful, or if it's taking a little bit longer or is less than ideal, it doesn't really matter, because if they are at the end getting with the solution, they kind of cover. But if you have a couple of days or several hours with the building stopped because something was missing, till someone get with something that the original expert will have solved in question of minutes, that is where the pain point start growing. So that service level agreement, those conversations, and I would say set of rules at the beginning, having the same set of people, or at least a basic group of same set of people from the beginning till the very end of the project, will make a huge difference on the quality and efficiency of the implementation and troubleshooting through the starting process.
When it comes to vendor selection, how do you tell a reliable vendor from one who will disappear when things get difficult? Lina's answer is revealing and useful.
Definitely the salesperson that stay around, that stick with you to continue growing and continue reinforcing the partnership, are usually the ones that really become partners and really help you out after.
Do you have any tips on how to identify ahead of time what type of behavior an account manager will ultimately have? The listeners are dying to know.
I know. I am dying to know. That is that is very, very difficult. And I do not have a formula for that one because I did have both the scenarios. I did have both the scenarios where my first gut feeling was like, ooh, I don't like this person. And at the end of the day, it was one of the best deliverables that we got. And the contrary, the ones that are like, ooh, this person is super cool. I want to hang out more with this person. It looks super smart, super cool. And was one of the first ones to run away when the things get tough. So yeah, no, I am sorry. I do not have an answer for that one.
If you're about to sign a contract on a complex automation project, Lina has one piece of advice for each of the 4 critical stages.
Prior to awarding a vendor, definitely the exploring your network, like find references, examples, and experience from others. Like you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge. Like feed yourself with the experience and the knowledge of others to have as many points of reference to take the best decision on the available vendors. That would be my first one for that first part.
Okay, now a vendor has been awarded. You found the dream vendor, right? And with a salesperson you like, and they actually do a good job. Now, so during the design phase, what's one thing that we must get right?
I would say you need to be able to map the process and bring all the key players. In the moment that in the design phase you miss one of the key players, that's where holes start appearing. You need to bring like distribution, for example, you need to bring people from customer service, from inventory management, from quality. There's a bunch of pieces that you don't think on them at the beginning, like as direct part of a distribution operation. But they are definitely key players. So I will say design phase, make sure that all the key players for your process are covered on the design.
Great, great insights there. And I'll ask the next 2 phases here together at the same time. Prior to go live and post go live, one thing that we must get right for both of those phases.
Prior to go live, like there are 2 key parts that I will definitely put time on. One is training and kind of creating as much experience as possible in the people that are running the operation. And the second is testing and running the new system and the new interfaces and all the flow. Like the most you have it running before the big go live, like if you put that chunk of your business couple of weeks before, that way you start proving and testing all the pieces, the better. Those are the 2 things that I will dedicate a little bit more time to guarantee that the go live goes as smooth as possible.
And then after go live, is there anything else in particular specific to now you're in control of the system, one thing that you must get right?
Well, try to keep as much as possible the experts around. Like being having done the agreements with the vendors to keep them around, or you hiring, like keeping some type of consultants or something around, or having given the opportunity to your internal experts to grow that education, that interaction and everything from the beginning and keep them around. That will be my key point, because that will make them the difference between life and death once something breaks.
Pat Davison is Director of Standards at MHI, the largest material handling and supply chain association in North America. Pat brings a perspective that no vendor or integrator can offer, an independent, standards-focused view of what responsible mobile automation deployment actually requires. His distinction between ticking the compliance box and building a genuinely safe operation is something every operations leader needs to hear before they go live.
It might sound counterintuitive coming from someone like me to say something like that. But ultimately, it is rare for an object or for some sort of a process that complies with its standards to be involved in a safety incident. But often it's not quite enough. And just to put a slightly finer point on that, many, many years ago, several decades ago, the Robotic Industries Association, in conjunction with the R1506 standard, did an evaluation of some of the industrial robot related safety incidents they could find, and did a comparison of what they were able to learn about the incident, and then compare that to or look into whether that incident was somehow addressed in the standard. And in just about every case it was. So the typical areas of concern got into things like control of hazardous energy, or lockout tagout, perimeter safeguarding issues. There's a case someone else told me about where there was the process and the workaround, and literally there was somebody who there was a part that would get jammed several times a day, and the workaround for somebody was they devised a little hand tool. They walked around the perimeter guarding and unjammed the device with their little hand tool. So, again, not great, but it kept the enterprise afloat. Or then span of control. And what that means is you see a very large integrated process. Everything's come to a halt. You want to get in and figure out where the jammed area is and get things back into shape. It can be really difficult in an automated system like that to identify that one area where it looks like there could be several areas. Or you could have a situation where if that one item is removed, the whole system jumps back into life. And that can be extremely dangerous if you have several technicians within a guarded area, or perhaps in compromised positions. So and the good news is just about every standard, I can't think of a single standard that doesn't address those issues. So those types of things are addressed. And be it a prescriptive standard, or an American national standard, or through the work of a well-done risk assessment, you'll probably get there. But the part that's not enough is we've got the machinery and the biology. The machinery is often predictable, and the biology sometimes is not.
And for anyone deploying mobile automation in a facility where robots and people share the floor, Pat's guidance on operating zones and training before trusting is worth revisiting.
People walk downtown all the time. And I think we intrinsically acknowledge that sidewalks are for people and roads are for vehicles. Be aware of your surroundings. Be cognizant that there could be mobile automation coming through here. Avoid the space if possible. Don't loiter or congregate in the space. Don't leave things behind if you're in the space, but go in, do what you need to do, and get out, and be aware of of that space when you're there. Again, it's not, in my mind, it's not that much different from the outside or the built world. People know how to navigate this stuff, and I think they'll ultimately be familiar with it. Just bringing it into the facility, into the enterprise, might be a little different, but I think trust your people, train them, trust them, make sure encourage them to do the right thing. That ought to do the trick.
Yeah, I like that order: train, then trust. Not necessarily trust then train, but train first, then trust.
Yeah, train, then trust. Yeah,
absolutely. The insights from our guests are based on lived experiences, not slide decks or demos. Luckily for us, they share both what works and what they would do differently, or what they wish they'd known sooner, what they would tell someone who was standing where they once stood. The mission statement of this podcast is to meet you where you are on your own automation journey and help you get as much right as possible, to move as fast and as far as you want to. The lessons learned by our experts over their careers are valuable fuel for the engine of your automation transformation. Don't pave the cow path, as Troy puts it. Know your signals before you act, as Derrick advises. Plan for the worst case at every stage, as Lina learned the hard way. And understand that meeting standards gets you to the start line, not the finish line, as Pat makes clear. And our journey is far from over. In episodes to come, we're going deeper into the technology side of automation, the sensors, systems, and design details that don't make it into the brochure. We're also exploring what it really takes to manage complex, multi-system deployments, the process discipline, the foundational work, and the decisions that separate automation that delivers from automation that disappoints. Subscribe so you don't miss it. If you found this episode valuable, share it with a colleague who's part of an automation decision, whether they're just getting started or deep in the process of getting it right. For Rockrich, I'm Colin. We'll see you next time.